The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society, and we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. We decided long ago that the dangers of excessive and unwarranted concealment of pertinent facts far outweighed the dangers which are cited to justify it. And there is very grave danger that an announced need for increased security will be seized upon by those anxious to expand its meaning to the very limits of official censorship and concealment. That I do not intend to permit to the extent that it's in my control.
After a deluded gunman assassinated President Kennedy, our nation turned to Gerald Ford and a select handful of others.
A new world order can emerge, a new era, freer from the threat of terror, stronger in the pursuit of justice, and more secure in the quest for peace.
Because after investigating the origins of the crack epidemic, he claimed he found a link leading right to the CIA.
Men who were working for the CIA's army were responsible for bringing all that cocaine into Los Angeles that sparked the crack epidemic.
The CIA's army, Webb says, were the Contras, the anti-communist rebels fighting the government of Nicaragua back in the 1980s, an army founded and funded by the CIA. Webb wrote that some Contra supporters smuggled cocaine to America to raise money for their cause.
The CIA has been bringing drugs into this country.
As then CIA Director John Deutsch discovered, it's an accusation that rings true for many, especially for some in the African-American community. Were U.S. government officials aware of drug smuggling in and around the Contra movement? And did they simply choose to ignore it? One U.S. Senator says, absolutely.
There's no question in my mind there is a complicity in the flow of drugs into this country. Complicity in the flow of drugs into this country, period.
A Senate investigation led by John Kerry of Massachusetts found that individuals who provided support for the Contras were involved in drug trafficking. Cele Castillo told Dateline he observed rampant drug smuggling at that airport.
Well, what we had was that we had Contra pilots flying out of Ilopango smuggling drugs into the U.S., cocaine specifically.
He claims the smuggling was so open it had to be condoned by the U.S. government. Castillo says when he reported all of this to his bosses at the DEA, he was told to ignore it.
So you were told point blank? Point blank, stay away from it. It's a covert operation being run by the White House.
President Bush issued a written statement this Christmas Eve pardoning former Defense Secretary Caspar Weinberger and 5 others for their involvement in the Iran-Contra scandal.
I want to express to the President my deep appreciation for his principled decision in granting this pardon and thereby correcting a terrible injustice that was being perpetrated on me.
But if Cap Weinberger and the 5 others are off the hook tonight, it appears that George Bush has moved right to the center of the bullseye.
In light of President Bush's own misconduct, we are gravely concerned by his decision to pardon others who lied to Congress and obstructed official investigation.
A world where the rule of law, not the law of the jungle, governs the conduct of nations. When we are successful, and we will be, we have a real chance at this new world order.
George Bush is the President-elect of the United States. He has won the state of Florida, according to our projections. 25 electoral votes. NBC News projects that George Bush, it's been a night of first giving it to Al Gore, then taking it away on the part of the networks. George Walker Bush, the new President of the United States, the Governor of Texas, the first father-son governor combination since the Adams family. This is the scene in Austin, Texas tonight.
mass murder in Manhattan, a human tragedy of biblical proportions, killing, maiming, touching thousands in America and throughout the world. Locations Irish people know so well, the symbolic economic, political and military power centers of the United States. We trace the events of an awesome day, the likely criminals and probable effects. Prime time.
Some of the key suspects come to mind: Osama bin Laden. Who knows what?
Well, that would begin to say that.
Yeah, John, I have just been told from a U.S. law enforcement official that they're saying it is evident that this is a terrorist-related attack, and among the key targets, key people that they're looking at is Osama bin Laden. It was just last Friday that the U.S. State Department put out a worldwide caution to American citizens traveling abroad and also to U.S. government facilities, and they said that terrorism knows no limits, whether it's on U.S. soil or outside.
The world will not be the same from today on. It's an attack against our whole civilization. I don't know who is responsible. I believe we will know in 12 hours. If it is a kind of bin Laden organization, and even if it's something else, I believe that this is the time to deploy a globally concerted effort led by the United States, the UK, Europe, and Russia against all sources of terror.
Early indications, according to U.S. officials who tell NBC's chief foreign affairs correspondent Andrea Mitchell, is that Osama bin Laden is being indicated because this note says he was the only terror leader with the capability of coordinating such an attack.
By the way, Afghanistan's ruling Taliban movement on Tuesday said that Osama bin Laden, they're closely allied with him, was not responsible for the attacks on the United States. What happened in the United States, according to the Taliban, was not a job of ordinary people. It could have been the work of governments. Osama bin Laden cannot do this kind of work. Neither can we, a Taliban spokesman said.
Americans have many questions tonight. Americans are asking, who attacked our country? The evidence we have gathered all points to a collection of loosely affiliated terrorist organizations known as Al-Qaeda. But its goal is not making money. Its goal is remaking the world and imposing its radical beliefs on people everywhere. The terrorist practice a fringe form of Islamic extremism that has been rejected by Muslim scholars and the vast majority of Muslim clerics, a fringe movement that perverts the peaceful teaching of Islam. The terrorist directive commands them to kill Christians and Jews, to kill all Americans, and make no distinctions among military and civilians. There are thousands of these terrorists in more than 60 countries.
2 planes had 5 hijackers and 2 other planes had 4 hijackers each. The director of the FBI, Mr. Mueller, is here with me, and we would be pleased to respond to your questions.
All the hijackers, were they ticketed passengers? And if not, do you know how they got on the planes?
Yes, they were ticketed passengers. And, the investigation is continuing. That is our best view at this time as to the numbers in the planes they were on.
Mr. Director, can you clarify us, please, on what you've been able to verify and document concerning the flight path of 77 into the Pentagon? Did it go over Washington, D.C. first? Into the Pentagon. Did it go over Washington, D.C. first?
I really can't comment on what we have with regard to that particular flight.
There are thousands of these terrorists in more than 60 countries. They are sent back to their homes or sent to hide in countries around the world to plot evil and destruction. The United States respects the people of Afghanistan. After all, we are currently its largest source of humanitarian aid, but we condemn the Taliban regime.
America strikes back. Afghanistan is pounded with bombs and missiles from the air and sea.
We are supported by the collective will of the world.
Homeland Security has stepped up to protect against retaliation, and bin Laden himself sends a videotaped threat to the American people.
The Iraqi regime possesses biological and chemical weapons.
No question we have said that Saddam Hussein possesses biological and chemical weapons.
We know where they are. They're in the area around Tikrit and Baghdad and east, west, south, and north somewhat.
And all this will be made clear in the course of the operation for whatever duration it takes.
And are you confident that you'll also find weapons of mass destruction?
I believe we will find evidence of the programs of chemical and biological weapons, yes.
How about the actual weapons?
Well, I just don't know. Let's wait and see.
White House officials said tonight the president will give Saddam 48 hours, not 72, 48, to get out of Iraq or face a U.S.-led invasion.
The Iraqi regime continues to possess and conceal some of the most lethal weapons ever devised. Saddam Hussein and his sons must leave Iraq within 48 hours. For their own safety, all foreign nationals, including journalists and inspectors, should leave Iraq immediately.
One U.S. senator says, absolutely.
There's no question in my mind there is a complicity in the flow of drugs into this country, period.
President Bush and Senator Kerry, their final debate, the setting, the American West, the candidates' last chance to go head-to-head. America is watching. Taxes, stem cell research, abortion, all of that against the continuing backdrop of the war in Iraq and against terrorism here at home and also abroad.
President George Bush and Senator John Kerry.
You were both in Skull and Bones, the secret society.
It's so secret we can't talk about it.
What does that mean for America?
It's so secret we can't talk about it.
What does that mean for America? The conspiracy theorists are going to go wild.
I'm sure they are. I don't know. I haven't seen the web.
Number 322?
First of all, he's not the nominee. And, look, I look forward...
Are you prepared to lose?
No, I'm not going to lose.
You both were members of Skull and Bones, a secret society at Yale. What does that tell us?
Not much, because it's a secret.
After a deluded gunman assassinated President Kennedy.
Is there a secret handshake? Is there a secret code?
I wish there were something secret I could manifest.
322, a secret number?
There are all kinds of secrets, Tim. There are all kinds of secrets, Tim. But one thing is not a secret. I disagree with this president's direction that he's taking the country. We can do a better job, and I intend to do it.
And we'll be watching the...
The number one recipient of contracts was Vice President Cheney's former company, Halliburton, and its subsidiary, Kellogg Brown & Root.
KBR. We're the Army's contractor on the battlefield. Currently 65,000 KBR people around the world assisting the troops. And 10 of what?
You know, the military-industrial complex isn't just the people in the Pentagon and the people producing
the weapons, it's now increasingly got a very large service sector.
Have an egg.
Things that troops used to do, like peel potatoes and do laundry, we now have contractors doing.
In 1992, there was a contract of $9 million given out to a company, Kellogg Brown & Root, to study the idea, should the Pentagon start using the private sector to do some of the support type functions like food service, latrine duty, but even maybe some military things as well. And the Secretary of Defense at the time was one Dick Cheney. So Cheney gives the contract out. Kellogg Brown & Root comes back and says, this is a terrific idea. The next 10 years, they get 700 or 800 contracts to do just that.
Well, I ran Halliburton. I'm proud of it. Halliburton's a quintessential.
This company brought in a Rolodex guy, a former U.S. congressman, defense secretary, chief of staff to a president, to make sure that he could get doors opened not only in Washington, but in capitals all over the world. And yes, he becomes personally wealthy from that. No question about it. His net worth went from $1 million or less to $60 or $70 million in the span of 5 years.
It's the answer that led those who've been told for so long by so many to be cynical and fearful and doubtful about what we can achieve, to put their hands on the arc of history and bend it once more toward the hope of a better day. It's been a long time coming, but tonight, because of what we did on this day, in this election, at this defining moment, change has come to America. There is no place for a tough campaign opponent. She possesses an extraordinary intelligence and a remarkable work ethic. I am proud that she will be our next Secretary of State.
We will not pull back our support for emerging democracies when the going gets rough. So for the United States, supporting democratic transitions is not a matter of idealism. It is a strategic necessity.
This is what popular uprising looks like. After weeks of scenes like these across the country, resulting in dozens dead. It appears to be the end for Tunisia's president after 23 years in power.
It only took them starting to chant, and within 2 minutes of them starting to chant, the tear gas grenades came in.
In the streets of Cairo, water cannons being used against demonstrators.
The enormous demonstrations by the Egyptian people. We've borne witness to the beginning of a new chapter in the history of a great country.
My argument today is that Libya and the Arab Spring shows that the United Nations needs a new way of working, because the Arab Spring is a massive opportunity to spread peace, prosperity, democracy, and vitally security.
A new world order can emerge, a new era, freer from the threat of terror, stronger in the pursuit of justice, and more secure in the quest for peace.
An order in which a credible United Nations can use its peacekeeping role to fulfill the promise and vision of the UN's founders.
Such is a world worthy of our struggle and worthy of our children's future.
Shows that the United Nations needs a new way of working, because the Arab Spring is a massive opportunity to spread peace, prosperity, democracy, and vitally security, but only if we really seize the opportunity.
The UN Security Council has authorized a no-fly zone over Libya,
10 of its 15 members voted in favour. There were no votes against, but China and Russia were among 5 abstentions. The resolution also authorises all necessary measures. That's code for military action to protect civilians.
Innocent civilians were beaten, imprisoned, and in some cases killed. That's why the United States has worked with our allies and partners to shape a strong international response at the United Nations. Our focus has been clear: protecting innocent civilians. Innocent civilians were beaten.
I am very pleased to welcome Minister Gaddafi here to the State Department. We deeply value the relationship between the United States and Libya. We have many opportunities to deepen and broaden our cooperation, and I'm very much looking forward to building on this relationship. So, Mr. Minister, welcome so much here. Thank you. We're delighted you're here.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much. Thank you.
Tomorrow. Thanks.
Wow.
Unconfirmed.
Unconfirmed. Yeah. Unconfirmed. No. Unconfirmed reports about Gaddafi being captured.
Really?
Unconfirmed. Yeah. We've had too many. We've had a bunch of those before. We've had, you know, have had him captured a couple of times.
Land of unconfirmed reports.
Yes, we came, we saw, he died.
After a deluded gunman assassinated President Kennedy.
Celebrations erupt in Libya after Colonel Gaddafi is shot dead. Graphic images of his body are broadcast around the world. He was wounded and captured as he tried to flee his home city of Sirte. But moments later, he was killed by government fighters.
Colonel Gaddafi is dead, killed by revolutionary fighters as he tried to flee his hometown of Sirte.
Hello, hello. Merhaba. Hello, how are you? Everyone all right?
People are scared. That's why we're getting no reaction here.
Who speaks English? I want one person. All right, you speak English? Look, madam, we're here to help you. Okay? How many people are you on the boat? How many? 560. Okay. Now listen, everyone. You're now safe. You're now safe.
ميت واحد ميت هنا ميت واحد واحد ميت صوص ميتين صوص ميتين بس سيدي حتى بيهم أرض الميتين أرض الميتين صوص أنا خليش معنا خلي.
This previously unseen footage was obtained by Vice News, filmed by the men of the Libyan Coast Guard. Libya serves as one of the busiest and most dangerous gateways for migrants being smuggled out of Africa into Europe. The flow of migrants has reached epic proportions since the nation's descent into civil war.
Germany is facing a drastic number of refugees by the end of 2015, believed to be in the region of 1.5 million.
It is not quite on a biblical scale, but an exodus it certainly is. Migrants who've been trapped at the railway station in Budapest now deciding to walk the hundreds of miles to Germany and what they see as the promised land.
French writer Renaud Camus calls the influx the Great Replacement and says it's the biggest thing to happen to France since the 15th century.
Quel est l'objectif? Ça va faire parler. Mais l'objectif, c'est relever le défi du métissage. Ce n'est pas un choix. C'est une obligation. Si ce volontarisme républicain ne fonctionnait pas, il faudra alors que la République passe à des méthodes plus contraignantes encore. Nous devons changer. Alors nous allons changer.
And the United States has supported the forces of change. We were inspired by the Tunisian protests that toppled a dictator because we recognized our own beliefs in the aspiration of men and women who took to the streets. We insisted on change in Egypt because our support for democracy ultimately put us on the side of the people. We supported a transition of leadership in Yemen because the interests of the people were no longer being served by a corrupt status quo. We intervened in Libya alongside a broad coalition and with the mandate of the United Nations Security Council because we had the ability to stop the slaughter of innocents and because we believed that the aspirations of the people were more powerful than a tyrant. And as we meet here, we again declare that the regime of Bashar al-Assad must come to an end so that the suffering of the Syrian people can stop and a new dawn can begin.
The White House is now asking Congress authorization for $500 million. That would be $500 million to train and equip these moderate rebels in Syria. But there's deep concern, as you know, that some of that equipment could wind up in the hands of ISIS if these guys lose.
Well, that's been the president's principal reason for delaying until this point, arming rebels in Syria, which is something, as you know, that some of his advisors, Hillary Clinton included, Secretary Kerry included, have been pushing for some time. That some of his advisors, Hillary Clinton included, Secretary Kerry included. Now he's doing it.
Over the last several days, we've seen significant gains made by ISIL, a terrorist organization that operates in both Iraq and in Syria.
They are tremendously well funded. Oh, this is beyond anything that we've seen. So we must prepare for everything.
Beyond anything. Prepare for everything. Want more?
And one of those groups is ISIL. Let's be clear about ISIL.
ISIL is a terrorist organization.
I've been telling you for 2 years that Islamic extremists are determined to kill you, and telling you for months that ISIS is coming for you.
In fact, when the CIA wants to leak something in the US, they usually go to the Washington Post.
And
about the CIA and the Mossad on the ground working side by side with the Qataris, the Turks, the Saudi Arabians, and of course the swarm of jihadis coming from everywhere, but especially across the border from Iraq. Now, if you are a neo-colonial power, like Britain and France, or an empire like the US, you can trample on nations' sovereignty anywhere and anyhow, any place. And this is exactly what's happening. And that's why Russia has been opposed to it from the start, because Moscow sees that as the end of the sovereignty of the nation states.
This is an ABC News special report.
Good morning, I'm George Stephanopoulos, and we are coming on the air because we have just learned that the U.S. ambassador to Libya has been killed. It happened overnight. When angry militants stormed the U.S. consulate in Benghazi, Libya, they fired shots, set the building on fire. Almost a dozen Americans were inside being guarded by Libyan security. And it appears the attack was inspired by an anti-Muslim film produced by an American-Israeli filmmaker living in California. And Martha, we are also seeing those protests against the U.S. Embassy in Cairo, all sparked by this film, Innocence of Muslims, an anti-Muslim film. Pretty obscure, only shown once in a Hollywood theater, but it got out on YouTube and has inflamed militants around the world.
It certainly has.
And this is a Fox News alert. Intelligence sources have in fact confirmed exclusively to Fox News that 100 men took part in what they are calling a coordinated assault on the U.S. consulate in Benghazi last week. In addition, the sources say the terror strike that took the lives of 4 Americans was carried out with precision in 2 separate waves. Now, the terrorists were heavily armed and not only rocket-propelled grenades, but mortars as well. And also new today, and I warn you, this footage is very graphic. We can now show you for the first time on this show Ambassador Chris Stevens' body being found by looters and later dragged through the streets of Benghazi following the shootout and the storming of our consulate there. Now, what you're seeing, a still photo captured of that horrific moment. Now, you can also make out that this photo has a bloody gash. Right there, you can see it on Stevens' head. Now, in light of these breaking developments about the coordinated nature of the attack and now seeing the reality of what our ambassador went through, it is becoming more and more clear that this White House was misleading you, the American people, in the wake of this tragedy.
Bill, still maintaining that there was no evidence of a pre-planned attack. How come?
Bill, let me just repeat now.
Again, how is it that
based
the
on the
attackers had
information,
RPGs, you know, automatic weapons?
Bill, I know
mortars?
you've done a little bit of reading about Libya since the unrest that began under Gaddafi. The place is has an abundance of weapons.
No question about it. But do you expect a street mob to come armed that way?
There are, unfortunately, many bad actors in that country. And
this is just a random crowd that got together with their heavy weapons, got insulted by the film, and decided to go, you know.
As I think I just said.
There was discussion going on afterwards, but once the investigation started, the FBI spoke to them before we spoke to them. And so other than our people in Tripoli, which I think you're talking about Washington, right?
Yeah, the point I'm making is a very simple phone call to these individuals, I think would have ascertained immediately that there was no protest prior to this. I mean, this attack started at 9:40 p.m. Benghazi time, and it was an assault. And I appreciate the fact that you called it an assault. But I mean, I'm going back to then Ambassador Rice, 5 days later, going to the Sunday shows, and what I would say purposefully misleading the American public.
Joining me now for the very latest, the U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, Susan Rice. Ambassador Rice, welcome back to Meet the Press.
Thank you. Putting together the best information that we have available to us today. Our current assessment is that what happened in Benghazi was, in fact, initially a spontaneous reaction to what had just transpired hours before in Cairo, which were prompted, of course, by the video. Well, Candy, first of all, let's recall what has happened in the last several days. There was a hateful video that was disseminated on the internet. It had nothing to do with the United States government, and it's one that we find disgusting and reprehensible.
Madam Ambassador, he says that this is something that's been in the planning stages for months. I understand you have been saying that you think it was spontaneous. Are we not on the same page?
Where, of course, as you know, there was a violent protest outside of our embassy sparked by this hateful video.
The White House says it has nothing to do with the president's policies. Let's watch.
This is not a case of protests directed at the United States writ large or at U.S. policy. This is in response to a video that is offensive.
You don't really believe that?
Chris, absolutely, I believe that.
Madam Secretary, do you disagree with me that a simple phone call to those evacuees to determine what happened wouldn't have ascertained immediately that there was no protest?
We have no doubt they were terrorists, they were militants, they attacked us, they killed our people. But what was going on and why they were doing what they were doing
Again, we were misled that there was supposedly protests and then something sprang out of that, an assault sprang out of that. And that was easily ascertained that was not the fact. And the American people could have known that within days, and they didn't know that.
With all due respect, the fact is we had 4 dead Americans. Was it because of a protest, or was it because of guys out for a walk one night who decided they'd go kill some Americans? What difference at this point does it make? It took the lives of those brave men. We've seen rage and violence directed at American embassies over an awful internet video that we had nothing to do with.
Why is Hillary Clinton running for president?
What's she running on? What's her message?
There is a lot of concern and speculation about what Hillary Clinton's message is going to be.
What is Hillary Clinton's message? 10 seconds or less.
That's impossible.
The process is rigged. This whole election is being rigged. That election is going to be rigged, and I hope the Republicans are watching closely. It's a rigged system. It's just terrible what's going on.
First of all, it's rigged, and I'm afraid the election is going to be rigged. I have to be honest.
The whole thing is one big fix.
It's a rigged system. It's a rigged election. We're going to beat the rigged system. We're going to beat the rigged election.
Donald Trump tonight seizing on a controversy brewing for Democrats after thousands of leaked emails showed Democratic Party officials possibly plotting against Bernie Sanders in his race against Hillary Clinton.
Tonight, a major snag on the road to party unity. WikiLeaks releasing nearly 20,000 internal DNC emails, including some that appear to show efforts to undercut the rise of Bernie Sanders.
On those emails that were released on Friday, John Podesta, the chairman of Hillary Clinton's campaign, emails talking about those speeches she gave to private groups.
George, when you see something postmarked from Russia, you should be afraid to open up the document.
These are legit, aren't they?
I don't know. I refuse to open these documents. I refuse to allow a foreign government, foreign companies to interfere and meddle and manipulate information. So I don't know if it's true, and I refuse to open them up. And I've asked the staff at the DNC and all our Democratic allies, don't open up that crap because it's postmarked from Russia.
Experts are telling us that Russian state actors broke into the DNC, stole these emails. And other experts are now saying that the Russians are releasing these emails for the purpose of actually helping Donald Trump.
What evidence is there that the Russians were behind this in terms of the hacking or in terms of the timing by WikiLeaks?
Well, we need to let the experts speak on this.
If this is about democracy, does it matter that the source of these emails or the source of the hacking at least is most likely from a country that doesn't take democracy very seriously, Russia, because that is what has been published?
Well, that's false. James Clapper, the head of U.S. intelligence, has come out and said...
As far as the WikiLeaks connection, the evidence there is not as strong, and we don't have good insight into the sequencing of the releases or when the data may have been provided. We don't have as good insight into that.
That they have no attribution in relation to who supplied WikiLeaks material. They're not certain as to motive, and there's our publications, and then there's various hacks that have occurred in the United States over the past 2 years from a wide variety of actors.
Then he also said this. Listen.
Russia, if you're listening, I hope you're able to find the 30,000 emails that are missing. Let's see if that happens. That'll be next.
This was truly beyond the pale. I mean, he is encouraging Russia, which by all accounts was behind a leak of our one of our major political parties. It's as if, this is a child.
And they're frustrated that the shift has now become Russia has these emails, not the deception, not the negative things, and it's deflect, and make it all about Russia.
Do you actually think to say, I'm going to be friendly with Vladimir Putin, be friendly, it would be great if we got along? How do you think Ukraine feels about that? How do you think the people he repressed feels about that? That is an irresponsible statement, and that is what we just saw.
He has made a number of statements pleasing to Russia and Vladimir Putin, and Russia has been clearly interested in propping up Donald Trump. This is the story of the year if it turns out to be true that Russia has meddled in our elections.
Look, Putin, from everything I see, has no respect for this person.
Well, that's because he'd rather have a puppet as president of the United States.
No puppet.
And it's pretty clear.
You're the puppet.
It's pretty clear you won't admit that the Russians have engaged in cyber attacks against the United States of America, that you encouraged espionage against our people, that you are willing to spout the Putin line, sign up for his wish list, break up NATO, do whatever he wants to do, and that you continue to get help from him because he has a very clear favorite in this race.
We can now project the winner of the presidential race. CNN projects Donald Trump wins the presidency. The business tycoon and TV personality capping his improbable political journey with an astounding upset victory. Donald J. Trump will become the 45th president of the United States.
CNN has learned that the nation's top intelligence officials provided information to President-elect Donald Trump and to President Barack Obama last week about claims of Russian efforts to compromise President-elect Trump.
Of course, President-elect Donald Trump taking aim at U.S. intelligence after that controversial document with unconfirmed allegations that Russia has gathered material on Mr. Trump. He called it disgraceful.
The former British spy at the center of the unsubstantiated Trump allegations, Christopher Steele, who colleagues tell ABC News has gone into hiding. Today in Washington, Vice President Joe Biden confirmed that he and the president were briefed by intelligence officials.
We feel obliged to tell you, Mr. President, because you may hear about it. We can't say it's not true. We can't say it is true.
Donald Trump's first news conference, some 63 days after the election, was always going to be big news, but it became even more significant after the publication of unverified but explosive allegations claiming Russia had colluded with Trump and that it had compromising material on him.
I saw the information, I read the information outside of that meeting. It's all fake news, it's phony stuff. I think it was disgraceful that the intelligence agencies allowed any information that turned out to be so false and fake out. I think it's a disgrace. As far as BuzzFeed, which is a failing pile of garbage, and as far as CNN going out of their way to build it up, it's a disgrace. What took place, it's a disgrace, and I think they ought to apologize to start with. Michael Cohen.
Sir, since you're attacking us, can you give us a question?
Go ahead.
No, Mr. President-elect.
Go ahead.
Mr. President-elect, since you are attacking our news organization, can you give us a chance?
Your organization
You are attacking our news organization.
Your organization.
Can you give us a chance?
Don't be rude.
You're attacking us. Can you give us a question?
Don't be rude. No, I'm not going to give you a question. I'm not going to give you a question.
Can you state categorically?
You are fake news.
Under fire from Donald Trump, the director of national intelligence came to Capitol Hill today to make his case.
Sir, what's your response when you see Donald Trump still questioning U.S. intelligence?
No answer. Trump has repeatedly attacked America's intelligence agencies for concluding Russia hacked Democrats in an attempt to influence the election.
They have no idea if it's Russia or China or somebody. It could be somebody sitting in a bed someplace.
He said the intelligence briefing on so-called Russian hacking was delayed until Friday. Perhaps more time needed to build a case. Very strange. You don't have to read much between the lines to understand that he is alleging in some way that these intelligence officials are cooking the books and that this is some kind of a scam. As a former director of the CIA, how do you respond to that?
Very frankly, if a president is going to be successful, this is no way to start. The president has to work with the intelligence community.
Cameras missed their shot of the latest high-profile arrivals to Trump Tower. The United States' top intelligence officials opted for the private entrance for this highly anticipated briefing to set out their case that Russia interfered with the 2016 election. General Michael Hayden used to head the NSA and the CIA. He says this briefing is a big test. How unusual, how unprecedented is Donald Trump's very open and public derision and dismissal of the intelligence agency's conclusions?
Yeah, and that's important to realize. That's what's new, not the adjustment we have to make because there's a new president. We do that every 4 or 8 years. What's different here is that the president-elect, for his own reasons, has decided to put this out and make it public.
In the intelligence community, there's no longer any debate about Russia's interference. There's a widely held belief that the aim to help Trump came from the very top.
This is a covert influence campaign that I think succeeded beyond all possible expectations on the part of the Russian Federation. At a minimum, you've got me here talking to you, trying to explain why there appears to be a war between the president-elect and the American intelligence community.
The White House doubling down on its call for Congress to investigate allegations that President Obama illegally wiretapped Trump Tower before the election. The president himself made the claim on Twitter over the weekend, calling it a new low but did not offer any bit of evidence. FBI Director James Comey denies the claims and has called on the Department of Justice now to publicly refute them. Democrats say the president is trying to distract from investigations into his team's possible ties to Russia.
The events of this weekend, which included another troubling, baseless tweet from the president, highlight and in fact strengthen the argument for a special prosecutor to conduct the investigation.
Dark blazer, white shirt, red or blue patterned tie. This is the unchanging uniform of one of Washington's most respected insiders, and the Justice Department's pick to lead the investigation into Russia's interference in the 2016 election. The choice of Robert Mueller for special counsel has been met with unusual universal praise from both sides of the aisle.
I think he's a person of great integrity.
He'll be above politics.
You will not push him around.
Completely unimpeachable in all respects.
He will investigate the matter and follow the facts wherever they may lead.
Mr. Director, can you clarify us, please, on what you've been able to verify and document concerning the flight path of 77 into the Pentagon? Did it go over Washington, D.C. first?
I really can't comment on what we have with regard to that particular flight.
Director, origin of some, if not all, of the hijackers. What can you say at this point about the national origin?
I'm not prepared to comment on that.
He is the former FBI director who served 12 years in that job. He was actually held over 2 extra years before James Comey became the FBI director. He will have the full authority to investigate that any U.S. attorney would, including the power to file criminal charges. This is exactly what congressional Democrats have been pushing for.
For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned, no rumor is printed, no secret is revealed.